Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see everybody on for this. This is the third class of our summer seminar series. We're going to have Liliana on in just a minute. Just a few things. One is at the end, we will have the last half hour question and answer and discussion. When you have a question at the end, you can click the raise your hand button and I will call on you. But we'll go through the class and then have question and answers at the end. So Liliana is here from Italy, and we are really happy to have her here. So I'll go ahead and let her get started.
Okay, thank you, Jenny, and welcome to everybody. Thanks for inviting me. And I will start with a personal story, which I love to tell. Many people who know me, who have known me for many years, have heard this already, but maybe there are some of you who have joined the Schiller Institute course recently and have not heard it. I love this story because it's true and it really happened. In 1986, I had the fortune of being in Virginia with the Schiller Institute chorus, and we were rehearsing and preparing the performance of Mozart's Requiem, and I was in the soprano section there, which was a very interesting event for me. I had been in the US before, but this was the first time that I was singing with our chorus. And I remember very well that Lyndon LaRouche was coming to the rehearsals, checking what was going on with the chorus. And when he was asked to comment, he started saying, I don't care what you do. You can put scotch tape on the bassoon. You can do what you want, but we have to go back to the classical tuning, to C256, because otherwise the voices and the meaning of the music will be destroyed. Everybody was quite surprised, as often happens when LaRouche makes one of his statements. I was very interested in what he had to say. And I wanted, as I usually did, I wanted to investigate more about this issue. So when I went back, we did actually put, I believe we did put scotch tape on the bassoon of Mindy. And we did this performance of Mozart's Requiem at C256 for the first time. And when I went back to Milan, where I was living, I decided to find out more. I went to the Milan Conservatory, where my father was the head of the library at that time. He was a teacher of armonie e contrappunto, harmony and counterpoint, and piano and composition, but he also worked in the library. So he helped me find in the library of the Milan Conservatory, under the voice diapason, which is tuning fork. He helped me find a document which actually included a letter of Giuseppe Verdi on the question of tuning, in which Giuseppe Verdi confirmed completely what LaRouche was saying. This was not the first time that a statement by LaRouche on economics or also music was confirmed. He was to the point and prophetical on many things. And so I will start with that letter. Actually, no, if Jenny can first show the Xerox of the document which my father found at the Milan Conservatory. It's the Ministry of War. I'll tell you why. Yes, you see, istruzioni per l'applicazione della La 432, instructions to tune the wind instruments. That's why the Ministry of War, because they have military bands with wind instruments. Il nuovo diapason normale, the new pitch fork, which was established thanks to Verdi. And inside this document, there is a letter by Giuseppe Verdi to the music committee of the Italian government. If Jenny can show it, I will also read it to you. Okay, so this is the letter which Giuseppe Verdi sent to the music committee of the Italian War Ministry. It's dated Genoa, February 10th, 1884. Since the standard tuning fork was adopted in France, and that is 435 Hz, I suggested that Italy follow this example. I formally asked orchestras in various Italian cities, among which is the orchestra at La Scala, to adjust their pitch to the lower pitch of the French. If the musical commission of our government now believes, based on mathematical considerations, that the vibrations of the tuning fork should be reduced from 870, 435 complete, to 864, 432 complete, the difference is so small, almost unhearable by the human ear, that I would be glad to support it. It would be a very bad mistake, as it was proposed in Rome, to adopt a tuning fork of 900 vibrations, 450 complete vibrations. I agree with you that lowering the pitch does not at all reduce the sonority and brilliance of the performance. On the contrary, it gives something nobler, fuller, more majestic, and not as shrill as does a higher tuning fork. On my side, I would like to have a single tuning fork adopted in the whole musical world. Music is a universal language. Why should the same note be called A in Paris and in Milan and B flat in Rome? Sincerely yours, Giuseppe Verdi. So this beautiful letter, which is quite clear, says it all. When he speaks of mathematical reasons, he's referring to a report of a group of scientists, Italian scientists, like Grassilandi and Montanelli. These were physicists who were repeating the experiment done in France in the century before by physicists Sauveur and Savart, including on a violin. And this is an interesting experiment because we repeated the same experiment with Norbert Brenin in Cremona, at the International Violin Building School of Cremona, right after our conference. And they checked that these instruments, these famous, wonderful instruments, Stradivari, Amati, Guarneri violins, were built for C256, which equals to A432. And they determined in this way that this is the natural pitch for these violins and also for the human voice. As a matter of fact, the pitch, the tuning fork, which is used to check the bones for osteoporosis, is a C256 tuning fork. So this is corresponding to nature in the human body, and apparently also in ancient instruments such as Stradivari and Guarneri and Amati violins. And for these reasons, Verdi read this report of the scientists, and he refers to it in the letter, saying that for scientific, he calls them mathematical, but he means scientific reasons, this tuning fork has to be adopted. It is very similar to the French, because it's the so-called normale of France, which was 435, but it is more scientific. And he also says clearly in the letter, we cannot have what is being proposed from Rome, which is a very high tuning of 450. And this was at the time in some theaters, in opera theaters, it was used so much that Verdi refused to perform in one of these theaters in Naples because the tuning fork was that high. And it is that high today, for 50 not, but for sure for 48. For example, in Berlin, in Salzburg, and Florence. I know this from singers I met in the meantime, who confirmed that while in the US it stayed to 440, in Europe, and in particular in Berlin, because of Karajan, in Salzburg and Florence, it has arrived to those 450 which Verdi was denouncing, because some of these conductors, like Karajan, wanted a very brilliant sound of the orchestra. And I know from Renata Tebaldi, who sang with him, that he was disturbed by the voices. So he asked, for example, Renata Tebaldi to sing the same aria 2 or 3 times until her voice was reduced, because he only was interested in the sound, the brilliant sound of the orchestra, and not in the voices. And when I read this text by Verdi, I was enthusiastic, first of all, because this confirmed that Verdi was a very smart person, not only about music, but also about science. And I had the occasion of talking to Lyndon LaRouche in Germany a few weeks later. And we decided, based on this letter of Verdi, to launch a Schiller Institute campaign, because we were quite sure that singers would endorse it, for 2 reasons. First, because there was a lack of Verdi voices at that time, precisely because of the high tuning. The high tuning is very bad for Verdi operas because it destroys the color of Verdi voices, which is a little bit darker than the voices, the light voices, for example, in Mozart or Donizetti or other operas. So it is a very special color, which is made possible only by A432. And we were right. We decided to start the campaign with an international conference in Milan, which is it was the home of Verdi, at least in the last time. That's where his grave is, in the Casa Verdi. And so we decided to do it in the Casa Verdi in Milan. It's called Casa Verdi because Verdi, with his heritage, had this home built for poor musicians. And to this day, poor musicians who don't have money because of the crisis live in this house. And his grave is there. So for him, it was an important enterprise. And I met the head of the Casa Verdi. I showed her the letter of Verdi. I said, the Schiller Institute wants to start this campaign. And she offered to guest the conference, particularly because I could organize for this conference 2 very, very famous Verdi singers, Renata Tebaldi and Piero Cappuccilli. They were with us, with me, with Helga, with Brainin. They were speakers at this conference. So if Jenny can show the first video, you'll see what we did there. We did for the first time the example in the 2 tunings, the Verdi tuning and the today's tuning.
Arriva Piero Cappuccilli, giusto in tempo.
Cappuccilli wurde vom Publikum ähnlich gefeiert wie die Tebaldi. Cappuccilli, der, wie gerade zu hören war, keinerlei Probleme mit den hohen Tönen hat, demonstrierte praktisch, was seine große Kollegin Tebaldi, die seit 11 Jahren ihre aktive Sängerlaufbahn beendet hat, am frühen Nachmittag erläutert hatte. Dass die viel zu hohe Stimmung zur Folge hat, dass die menschliche Stimme enorm an Volumen und Färbung verliert, weil sie nicht richtig sitzt. Außerdem werden die Sänger gezwungen, an den falschen Stellen das Register zu wechseln. Eine musikalische Sinnlosigkeit. Cappuccilli benutzte 2 Beispiele, in denen sich die Stimme, wie er erklärte, um den Registerwechsel von der Mittellage zum hohen Register bewegt. Zuerst aus Verdis Oper Ernani, einmal in tiefer Stimmung A 432. Dann in hoher Stimmung A 440. Na, wie war's besser? Keine Frage, in der tieferen Stimmung. Zur besseren Illustration noch einmal. Ich habe viel mehr Farbe, meinte Cappuccilli. Danach aus Verdis Troubadour zuerst tief. und dann hoch. Das überzeugte das Publikum. Und natürlich durfte der Dank an den großen Verdi nicht fehlen.
Okay, as you could hear and see, the audio was not corresponding to the image. This is an old video, and unfortunately with a German text, which I couldn't find the original English, but there were undertitles, and you could see from what the gestures of Piero Cappuccilli, particularly when he was explaining that on the register shift, which for the baritone is a baritone, is on the E natural. This was on, in the Hernani, it was on Vi credei, se troppo vi credei. And when he was singing with the high tuned piano, he had to shift while he should stay on a second register. And this was tiring for him, even if, as the audience say, you can do what you want, but still, he wanted to show that Verdi's intention was to keep that note in the second register, not to have any effect on that, particularly Vi credei. And in the other aria, in the Hernani, it was in fonda, on in fonda. He was showing it making like this. And when he went back to the high piano, he made that this was heavy, that you have to do, if you want to keep it in the second register, you have to do an incredible effort with your diaphragm to support the note, or most of the people just shift and change color. He said, anche il colore, it's also the color. And as you know, you can see maybe in the back here, this blue book is Verdi. This is the music manual in Italian. It's called Canto e Diapason. After this conference, we decided to publish it because one of the supporters of the campaign was Maestro Arturo Sacchetti, organist and head of artistic director of Radio Vaticana, who supported the campaign and was a close friend of LaRouche, as was also Piero Cappuccilli. They met, of course, after this conference, when he was again free. And this book was published in Italian with his initiative. And it shows, we published it, we worked on it, John Sigerson, myself, many others in the Schiller Institute, with many such examples as Cappuccilli was giving in the conference, and also with a map of these colors, what LaRouche used to call the palette of colors, which is going from the basso voice up to, through the baritone, alto, light soprano, lyric soprano, etc. And to show how this color palette, which the composers like Verdi, Mozart, Bach, others had in mind, and LaRouche was often quoting the well-tempered clavier as a good way to figure out how this palette was possible, that this is completely destroyed by the high tuning, as if you had a painting, a Renaissance painting, like the one I have here in Siena, which because of the high tuning becomes a modern painting with all the colors and the figures completely destroyed. So if you wonder why the Schiller Institute takes the effort of tuning down the pianos and rehearsing and performing at C256 or A432, which means when we do public performances like last November for Larouche's memorial in Germany, we have to tune the piano 2 times to keep the low tuning. We do this effort because, as Verdi said, you can have in this way a noble, majestic sound and not the shrills of a very high tuning. And also, as Renata Tebaldi was explaining at this conference, based on Verdi's letter, the fact that we have nowadays very few Verdi voices, which you can call real Verdi voices with a dark color of a Verdi voice, which is not only the basso, it's dark also for the soprano, it's dark for the mezzo, for example, Azucena. I remember meeting Fedora Barbieri, the famous Verdi alto, and she was saying, when I get the students who pretend to sing alto, and they start, and then whoop, they go up, and it's a light soprano, actually. So you don't have singers who correspond to the level and color of singers you had at the time Verdi was composing these operas. And he was composing these operas having in mind often specific singers with specific qualities, with specific register shifts, which are all displaced with the high tuning. So after this conference, we started the campaign with a petition to go back to Verdi's tuning, which had the letter of Verdi in it, which was endorsed by 2,000 singers and also some conductors and musicians, not only singers, all over the world, including very famous, John Sutherland, Montserrat Caballé, you name it. I mean, it's a very long list. Fedora Barbieri. I met many of them for interviews for Ibicus, the German magazine, including Pavarotti 2 times, Carlo Bergonzi, who had Verdi Voices master class in Busseto. I met him often there, and he was endorsing the campaign completely. He was talking in his master class, he was talking to students about this, about the importance of the Verdi tuning, but also conductors like Gorini, whom I met in Milan, who was in favor. So it was not only the singers, so it was endorsed by many. Placido Domingo was endorsing it. Based on this, we did a proposal, a legislation proposal at the Italian Senate. I found 2 members of Senate who decided to take up Verdi's letter and propose officially that Italy go back to Verdi's tuning. As you can imagine, when politicians start to get involved, this was immediately destroyed, this initiative, by interests, economic interests, wind instrument builders, who changed the law to A440. It made no sense at all, of course, because it did not reflect the intent of Verdi. But I'm quite sure that they paid the 2 senators to change the law. In any case, the campaign remained in the music world. As you can see in a minute from the second video, we had many of these musicians who joined the Schiller Institute campaign, including Antonella Banaudi, who is also a friend of mine. She gave classes in Virginia to our chorus members. Also on the Don Giovanni, we had a special project which was wanted by Lyndon LaRouche on the Don Giovanni of Mozart. And she, when I met her at the Bergonzi school, she was the winner of this master class. So she sang the main role in Busseto. After the concert, I went up to her and she decided to immediately join the campaign. She did the same as Cappuccilli. We went to Paris, we did the conference, and she gave the example. in the two tunings. We did the same in Ticino, in Tessin, again at the Casa Verdi with Antonella Banaudi. And so you will see in the video that she speaks about it, and also Conductor at the end speaks about the importance of this campaign. Jenny, the second video.
Sagte, es ist mir egal, ob ihr Klebstreichen auf den Fagottinstrumente, auf den Oboen tut. Ihr müsst die Stimmung des Orchesters runterkriegen, sonst sind die Stimmen kaputt und der ganze Sinn von der Oper verloren.
I knew what was required because I knew the music. I knew what you had to have because the music was based on the human singing voice.
Komischerweise fand ich einen Brief von Giuseppe Verdi im 1884, wo er schreibt genau, was der Lin sagt. Er sagte, es gibt wissenschaftliche Gründe, warum wir zurückgehen müssen zur, was er nannte, A 432 Hertz.
Most of the leading singers of that time, who were leading singers at the time, all joined our defense of this tuning against the higher tuning, which is actually very destructive.
Als sie reinkam, war natürlich das Publikum total aus dem Häuschen, weil die so berühmt war.
Mi batto estremamente perché non è giusto per i giovani che non si devono fare avanti in questa maniera, presi da una scuola dopo tanti anni di studio, sbalzati improvvisamente in un palcoscenico che può essere quello della Scala, quello di Milano, quello dell'Opera di Vienna, dove si trovano con un'orchestrazione così alta, sono perduti.
Das gleiche passierte mit Piero Cappuccilli.
Mentre arriva Piero Cappuccilli, giusto in tempo.
Devo dire, se all'inizio, all'epoca di Verdi, il diapason era 4,32 e lui ha scritto le opere su quel diapason, logicamente Verdi, che era una persona molto intelligente, conosceva le voci, aveva scritto per le voci. Vogliamo fare un esempio?
Den zweiten Register. Auch die Farbe, er sagt auch die Farbe ist ganz anders.
È tutta un'altra storia.
Das ist einer der Gründe, warum diese Kampagne unterstützt wurde, besonders von Verdi-Sängern.
E devo dire che quando ho provato il 432, per me è stata una scoperta piacevole. Io avevo provato Aida, Cieli Azzurri, che presenta veramente una grande difficoltà per il passaggio, perché la linea vocale è principalmente nella zona del passaggio. Ritornare a un'intonazione diciamo più bassa di quella che era usata soprattutto 20 anni fa, 30 anni fa, è una questione di rispetto per la volontà artistica del compositore, per la sua immagine del colore, del suono, del colore della voce e rispetto anche per lo strumento vocale.
It was amazing the difference and how much more round the music was with the Verdi tuning. This is the way these compositions were composed, and it was meant to be in that tuning. Our modern day orchestras are tuning ever higher. In Vienna, the flutes have had to shave off their instruments because they can't tune any higher. That's not natural. And I know the string instruments sound more brilliant when they're tuned higher. But is it just brilliance that we're looking for, or is it the essence of the way the music was written?
Okay, as you could see also here, there was a delay in the image and the sound. But essentially what Antonella Banaudi was saying confirmed what Cappuccilli was saying about the color and the registership, which goes also for Aida when she has to have a full F or the tenor, the famous Celeste Aida, which has a long full F, which has otherwise to shift because the register shift of the tenor is an F sharp, and you cannot keep it in the second register if the tuning is very high. And both Pavarotti and Gonzi were telling me that when they came back from the US to Italy or to Germany, they were in trouble because they had the same opera, but it was half a tone higher, the whole opera. So it was like singing a different opera. And Bergonzi actually in Florence, where they had 448, he said he protested officially, even before our campaign. He called the oboe player to his room, Camerino, and he told him now, similar to LaRouche, he didn't say put scotch tape, but he said, go down with that A, since the oboe is the one giving the A to the orchestra, or I don't sing, you can sing for me. So he was forced to lower the tuning. He gave the A, and it was a bit lower than 448. And Domingo, after our campaign, after the conference at the Casa Verdi, we were all over the press. All of a sudden, the Schiller Institute became world famous just because so many singers had endorsed the campaign. And we were in Le Monde, we were in the New York Times, Corriere della Sera. And they interviewed Domingo, who also proposed a strike of singers to get back to the lower tuning. Another big supporter of the campaign and friend of LaRouche was Norbert Brenin, the famous first violin of the Amadeus Quartet. He did, right after the conference in Milan in April 1988, he repeated the experiment of Sabat and Sauveur on the Stradivari violin in Cremona, which is kept in the City Hall of Cremona. Is actually the only Stradivari violin which has not been prolonged, which has not been changed, which is original. So they put it out of the museum, and we went to the International Violin Building School and did the experiment, which is like they had some special machine which was throwing notes into the violin, and when it got to C256, it started vibrating very strongly, which indicates, as Norbert Brenin says, that this was it was built for that tuning, and he played it also after, and he was very happy, and he had to say this, which I will read you. About the Verdi tuning. It has become a universally recognized fact that the lower tuning of A432 is of great help for all singers. On the other hand, the advantage that the lower tuning offers instrumentalists is not so well documented. It is universally accepted that for wind instruments, brass and woodwinds, the difficulties in playing in the lower tuning are, sorry, I have lowered the volume, now increasing. In the lower tuning are insurmountable and in fact will require complete reconstruction. With string instruments, there is obviously no problem. They need only be tuned somewhat lower. This has several consequences. The burden of the tension in the instrument is less. The tone is richer in substance, that is, it is broader, since it is possible for the player to draw the ball nearer to the bridge without there being unavoidable scratches. That means a more economical use of the bow, which increases the breadth of tone color and the dynamics. Of course, the projection is diminished, but only minimally. So he says similar things to what Verdi said about the voice, about the instrument. Also for the violin, the tone, the sound is richer and not so brilliant as Karajan wanted it, but he didn't use the word majestic, but it doesn't have the scratch in the case of the violin. In the case of the voice, Verdi used the word shrieks, shouts, gli strilli, the shouts di un corista troppo acuto, of a too high tuning fork. So we obviously want beauty. The Schiller Institute wants beauty and wants to reflect the intention of the composers. And the best way to do it is with this low tuning, because that's what they composed for. And as a matter of fact, the voices and the string instruments have the biggest advantages from this, as Antonella Barnaudi called it, from this respect for the composers and for the voices. Now, if you have a few minutes more of patience, I wanted to say that Verdi did this initiative and he managed to move the Italian government because besides being the most famous composer in Italy at the time, he was also involved in politics, as many of our important artists from the Renaissance on. Dante was one, he was exiled because of his political role. Petrarca was exiled too. He was an ambassador. He played a very important political role. And Verdi too, in all his operas, he used librettos and themes from Shakespeare and Schiller consciously, because he thought, as Schiller thought, that opera and drama are the way to educate and ennoble the population. Or, as LaRouche would put it, when you go to the opera, what's important is not the lady with the Armani suit in the first row, but it's the guy or the girl or the old lady in the last row who is not interested about the dress, but really gets moved by the opera. And as LaRouche had put it, I remember this conversation we had, at the end of the performance goes out of the theater a changed person. So this is the purpose. These composers and also these authors like poets like Shakespeare or Schiller, they wrote their operas with this intention, as Schiller said, because statecraft is the highest form of art, and through art you can change also the way political events happen. And Verdi was completely convinced of this. He became a member of Senate, and that's why the ministry and the government were listening to him. And he also used some of his operas to create a movement to get the Habsburgs away from Italy, the invaders, the oligarchy, essentially. At that time, Unfortunately, also today, Italy is under the heavy foot of the oligarchy, which can be called Habsburgs, then can be called Ursula von der Leyen and the European Union today. But he was creating a movement. People were using the Nabucco and Va Pensiero, the prisoners' chorus, as a way of to make a political statement. And one of the operas which shows this is Simone Boccanegra, which is not as famous as Rigoletto or La Traviata, but I think it's beautiful because it is based first on Schiller, on Die Verschwörung der Fiesco, the conspiracy of Fiesco. It's a fight between Genoa and Venice, which at the time were dominating Italy. This fight between Genoa and Venice was destroying the Italian nation. So I will show you now a video of Cappuccilli, the same Cappuccilli who sang the example in our conference, who played the main role, who sings the main role. Wait, I have to say something before. I just explain what the scene is all about. This is Simone Boccanegra, the Doge of Genoa, and the aria and concertato expresses the idea of a grand project which Italy should have, and is based on a letter of Petrarca of the Renaissance, in which the letter, actually the librettist Arrigo Boito explicitly refers to this letter of Petrarca, which invites the Doges of Venice and Genoa to stop fraternal wars and go to peace through discovery of the oceans. So this also inspired Toscanelli and Columbus in discovering America. The idea is Italy should not have these fraternal internal wars, but should be oriented towards discovery of new oceans. We would say today the maritime Silk Road, to discover to develop new continents. For example, for Italy, the Mediterranean and Africa is a natural thing. And this was the meaning of this letter of Petrarca. And Cappuccilli sings it. It is in a shortened way, but he says, while the large rain of the ocean invites you, you fight each other. And I invite you to stop these fraternal wars. Io vo gridando pace, io vo gridando amor. I'm crying for peace and love. So yeah, now you can play. Sorry, I get moved every time I hear this.
Did you mute yourself?
Am I muted? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm saying that this is very moving every time I hear it, because it's not only the Cappuccilli who sings beautiful, but as you can see in the course of the aria, he gets joy and kinds of convinces also the daughter, who is Mirella Freni. She was also supporting our campaign. I interviewed her. And also all the others characters who were planning to kill Simone Boccanegra. They respond to this call, instead of doing fraternal wars, to fight for peace and for love. And also the chorus, which is the population. So the chorus has a very important role in this opera, as it does in many operas of Verdi, Nabucco and others. And this shows what LaRouche was saying about how such a scene in an opera can move an audience, which is made of people who have beautiful souls in the Schiller sense, and who responds to such beautiful ideas, which are strengthened by the beautiful music. So you have a libretto which is based on Schiller, but you also have beautiful, beautiful voices and wonderful music, which doubles the dramatic effect. And in the moment when the Schiller Institute fights for Verdi tuning, but also fights for the New Silk Road and for peace, as opposed to war with Russia and China, as again, as LaRouche used to say, since time works also backwards, we are not only changing the future, but also the past, and respecting and giving sense to what Verdi, Petrarca, Dante, or in your case, Lincoln and Washington and others had done. This is like contributing also to the past. So that's what I wanted to say. Now you can ask questions.
All right, thank you. Oh, we have, okay, John Sheldon, you have a question. Go ahead.
I was just applauding.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so if you have a question, you can hover over your name and put the raise your hand icon. Any questions?
Everybody is so moved by Simone Boccanegra that they cannot talk.
Speechless. Well, I have a question. Just because I work with a lot of young singers as a voice instructor, and the biggest challenge I think today is even asserting that there is a standard or a principle at all. Mm-hmm. And I guess, I mean, this was now, I guess, 2 generations, Cappuccilli, Tebaldi, almost 2 generations ago. How do you think you can address that question where now there's not even this idea of a standard music or principle or anything like that?
Yes, that's more difficult today because at the time Cappuccilli and Tebaldi are dead, Norbert Brennin is dead, many of these artists, Bergonzi, with whom I worked, are dead, and they, including Pavarotti, I remember you wrote a book precisely on the question of education. How education today is destroying this principle that there is a standard because of the Frankfurt School and the Center for Cultural Freedom. There is now this idea that everything is allowed. It's only a question of taste. So if you want to sing a day for 50, or as they did in where was it in Germany, the poor Beethoven opera, which was destroyed completely by this Regie Theater, these modern directors who not only changed the opera in the sense of making modern costumes or putting it in the Nazi time, but they even changed the music in that case. And Helga Zepp-LaRouche wrote an article on this. And this is due to the fact that today people are taught that everything is allowed and that it's only a question of taste, and what you like is possible. So it is important all the more to instead go back to such examples like Verdi or Schiller or Shakespeare, because they did establish a principle of education. In particular, Schiller's letters on the Don Carlos, where he explains how he wrote this drama. I made a class on this here in Italy because Don Carlos is also a very famous opera of Verdi. And it is very interesting that the authors explain exactly this principle that there is a standard and that you, through these operas, want to educate the audience to a standard of beauty and of truthfulness. The idea that there is a truth is also denied today. There are many truths. Everybody can choose the truth they like on the question of COVID. No? There are a lot of conspiracy theories, people saying that it doesn't exist, that it's only, it has been invented. And this is equal. There seems to be no scientific basis, which is why Verdi and also LaRouche were insisting on making a connection between art, music, and science. There must be a scientific principle. Otherwise, it is anarchy and it is ugliness, which is what some of these, for example, modern artists explicitly want. In Florence, there was an exhibition of a woman who was showing horrible things because she wanted ugliness. This was her art, ugliness. And the principle of, from the Renaissance and the classical time, it was instead that art has to be truthful and has to be beautiful, even if it describes war or fraternal wars, like in the case of Simone Boccanegra or Macbeth, somebody killing. Even in this case, it has to be beautiful.
Thank you. I think Victor had a question. I'm going to unmute you. Can you unmute yourself, Victor?
Yes, I would like to say about the emotions. What emotions had influence in the music in this case? Because it's very different when I think emotionally and when I'm depressed, for example. And at the moment of to sing something in chorus by myself, I don't know. I think emotion is very important to the time to sing something. I don't know.
Yes, emotion, it depends. If you mean it in the touchy-feely sense, no. But in the sense of educating emotions, which is what Schiller said in his lectures on the aesthetic education of men, it is very important. And I remember Bergonzi in his master class in Busseto, he was, for example, teaching his students. They were singing an aria from La Traviata, the tenor. And he was singing, he was concentrated on the right tones, on doing everything right. And he was, you would say, he was showing no emotion. So Bergonzi stopped him right there and said, are you aware of what you are singing, or are you just trying to hit the high tone? Because this is, you have to imagine you're telling this which you're singing. You're really expressing an idea or an emotion. In this case, this was the love for someone who is, you cannot have, La Traviata, but it can be, like in the case of Cappuccilli, you could see how emotional he was. In the first part, he was very strong and authoritative. Then when he starts with the Verdi, with the Petrarca letter, when he starts saying, I look at this beautiful country, which is Italy, and destroyed by these fraternal wars, he was changing completely. He was changing the color, he was changing the expression. This is necessary. This makes, it transforms a singer into an artist. You cannot just learn to hit the tones. That's not enough.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Richard, did you have a question? You can unmute yourself.
Okay. Yes. So all of the features of our bodies, all of our physical features, as far as I know, they don't fall into 6 distinct categories. Everybody's height is different. They differ by a millimeter or 2 in some cases, but there is no definite, there are no 6 categories for the size of any part of our body or any of our other physical features like our temperature or what have you. And yet our voices seem to fall into these 6 distinct categories. The bass, the baritone, the contralto, the mezzo soprano, the tenor, I forgot that one, and the soprano. Any thoughts on why that might be the case?
Well, this was done, these differences were established by the composers, and they were based, first of all, on, as I said, this music manual, which I showed before, specifies how this goes through all voices. There is a lawfulness because the difference is generally 1 tone from each other, and in the register shifts too. Of course, there can be, like in Russia, there are bassos who are able, this bassi profondi, who are able to sing 1 octave lower than the regular basso because their length of their larynx is double as big. These are the people who sing in the Orthodox Church. But this is an exception in nature. But otherwise, the nature of the human voice has not changed ever since the Renaissance until now. What has changed is the tuning, which has made these voices more. These differences are now flattened, as Barbieri was saying, Fedora Barbieri. You have mezzo-sopranos, Verdi mezzo-sopranos, who are actually light sopranos. And you can hear the difference in the color. They sing the same notes. There are singers like Grace Bunbury, I met her too in Bonn, who have moved from one voice to the other. She sang as soprano as mezzo, because she wanted to to challenge her own voice. But generally, there are also some tenors who started as baritones and the other way around. But this is normally due to the fact that the teachers, not all of them, can recognize the real color of the singer. But it is lawful that there are these categories, otherwise it would be total anarchy.
Other questions? About from some of our international friends. You can also say where you're calling in from. Oh, good. We have questions. Great, Dave.
Dave and yes.
Hi there. Enjoyed that, Liliana.
Thank you.
A couple of things. One, just to restate what I think Richard was getting at was more speculative, like asking why the planetary register break, the asteroids are where they are. We know they are where they are, but it says something rather about the design of creation that the human race would have these 6 different register breaks. So I think Richard can correct me, but I think he was trying to get at the speculations on why the hand of God works the way it does. But secondly, I find it curious. I didn't remember at all that it was the instrument makers who gave us a hard time on the pitch proposal in Italy. To the inverse, the reason why the French, what Verdi's referring to is in the 1850s, they established the 435 pitch in France from a conference they had. London also had a conference. I won't go into that. But I'm convinced that Anton Schindler, the factotum of Beethoven, as a crusty old man, in 1855 sort of said the right thing after 40 years of nobody being willing to say the truth, which was at the Congress of Vienna. The Emperor of Russia paid a lot of money on instruments to jack the pitch up, because the instruments were not out of place, you know, at one point. So somebody spent a lot of money to jack the pitch of instruments up. So the argument that you can't spend money to put the instruments back in the right place is pretty silly. And the remarkable thing is it didn't take a genius to figure out that the Russian court brought these jacked up instruments into the Congress of Vienna for their brilliant, you know, sound, etc. It took 40 years for somebody just to put it out in public. And once it was put out in public, I think there's more to the story, but that much was done. It was in a journal by a good friend of the young Johannes Brahms. I'm just forgetting the name of the fellow. So on that, I guess, and also Margaret asked the question whether there's more to the story about behind the instrument makers. I'm saying that the story in the 1850s was, it was helpful to name the names of who made a deliberate decision to spend a lot of money to jack instruments up. And I think that's probably something like that also occurred in the attack against our pitch.
Well, in the case of the Nazi time, this was, besides the Russians, this was also the Nazis who increased the tuning of the wind instruments, particularly the brass instruments, because they wanted a stronger sound for military bands. And then this was imposed. The problem is, as you know, that wind instruments cannot be changed. So in this way, they impose the same high sound on all orchestras. And this was a decision. They obviously invested in that in the context of their military aggression plans. So many people speak of a Nazi high tuning. But what happened in Italy, I know for sure, because I was involved in the negotiations to get this the legislation proposal adopted. I wrote the legislation proposal with A432. It was in the Senate in this way in the beginning. And I know that wind instrument builders were mad at it because they had stocks of wind instruments which they couldn't sell if they would adopt a lower tuning, and had to build new instruments and throw away these old wind instruments. So they got mad. As a matter of fact, I got in touch with Orsi, which is the same wind instrument builder of the time of Verdi. If you look at this, I showed the picture of this Ministry of War. There are precise instructions how to change the wind instruments in order to adapt them to A432. And Orsi in Rome was the builder who did that at the time. And they're still there. I called them because some people in 2001, I didn't mention this, when there was the Verdi year, the 1,000 years from the death of Verdi, a bunch of initiatives for Verdi tuning were made, including Avvenire, the Catholic daily, reported Domingo on this, on the necessity, at least in the Verdi year, to do performances with the Verdi tuning. And so I contacted, for some of these orchestras, there was one in Rome, which wanted to perform at A432, and Orsi was still available, but they had obviously to get a budget. And because of the budget cuts in culture, which in Italy have not only in health, also because of the European Union, we had very big budget cuts in health, which is the reason why we had so many deaths in Italy, and in culture. So nobody would invest in building new instruments. The builder is available, but they just don't do it. And the ones who had the stock of all the instruments, they contacted the senators and made sure that they changed to A432.
Okay, Art, then Barbara, then Nancy Geis.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder if there were any choruses that you know of, or other opera groups that are trying to use the lower tuning.
Yes, as I said, in 2001, there were a bunch of initiatives in Parma, the city close to Busseto. And also, I was in contact with Maestro Silvano Frontalini. 3 years ago, we published also on the Schiller page. We made a Verdi festival with Verdi tuning, but he didn't build new instruments. He did a little bit like LaRouche. He put Scotch tape and tried to lower as much as he could with his orchestra. And he performed with a smaller orchestra outside in the piazza of Busseto. And we reported on it. I was unable to go there because I had an ankle surgery, but I sent friends of mine, including Antonella was there at the press conference, and a youth member of ours went there to interview Maestro Frontalini. Carlos is from Ecuador, and we published the interview. So there were a number of initiatives, but it never came to what Verdi wanted. He wanted this, as he says, music is a universal language. Why should a note be called A in Paris and B flat in Rome? This has not happened yet. We have different tunings from one city to the next.
Barbara. Hold on one second.
Unmute. Am I on?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I recently came across a quote by Gustav Mahler that I think is worth considering when we're talking about Verdi's tuning, and the fact that Verdi was really continuing a tradition. And if we don't continue Verdi's tuning, we are really getting rid of the tradition. Mahler's quote was, "Tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of flame." And I think if we get rid of Verdi's traditional tuning, we no longer have beauty. We have darkness instead of the flame.
But this is not Mahler saying this.
It isn't?
No, I ask you, was he saying, was he talking also about
Mahler?
Really? Oh, that's you should
yes.
send me this quote.
Tradition is not the worship of ashes.
I thought this was what you added, that he was just defending the tradition. He was defending the tradition. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it was the preservation of flame.
That's a very nice way to put it, and I think that's what we're doing. We are preserving the tradition and the flame. As Verdi used to say, torniamo all'antico, sarà un progresso. Let's go back to what's ancient. It will be a progress.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he went back to Dante, he went back to Shakespeare, he went back to Schiller. Well, went back, it was more or less the same time, but he was against, unfortunately, in the end, he was influenced a little bit by this modern in the Otello, the librettisti, the Arrigo Boito, but and he was quite old. But otherwise, he would never move from the tradition of classical drama.
Thank you. Nancy Geis.
Hi, Liliana. Thank you for this. I wanted to continue a little bit of the question of the vocal registers and human physiology, because we, our chorus in New York has worked with a mezzo-soprano who has a twin sister who is a soprano. So I'm wondering, I know they do duets. I haven't heard them yet, but I'm waiting for that. But I wonder how much of the color is a question of a mental approach, and how much is the natural physiology, and how much is that distinguished by, in Verdi singers, you say they have a much darker color.
Yes.
Right.
Well, as I said, there are exceptions. There are, like Grace Bunbury told me, she sang as a mezzo and also as a soprano, and she had no problem shifting from one to the other. Of course, there are voices which are more extended. They can go lower and higher than others. And in the case of the twins, it depends also on the training, because you can fake it a little bit if you want. You can fake a register shift, but a good singing teacher is normally able to detect these fake register shifts and find the natural one. And this is how you establish a voice. It's not really the color, because you have light sopranos, you have lyric sopranos, you have dramatic sopranos, Wagnerian sopranos, which are very dark, and the same is true for the tenor. You have the lyric tenor, the light tenor. So it's not very easy for a singing teacher, because as Jenny, I had also the experience of training young singers. It's not really easy. You have to be very experienced, like Maestro Beriano was. He said many cases, he said, you are not a baritone, you are a tenor, but you are a lazy one. And he figured it out from the register sheet.
Great. Margaret Sheldon.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Liliana. Nice to see you.
Hi, Margaret.
Hey.
Long
Grüß dich. I wanted to return to the question of the opposition, because I was looking again last night at this New York Times article from way back that reported on you know, the whole initiative, and it just seems to me that blaming the instrument producers, which, you know, and obviously there was a certain amount of opposition and money involved and blah blah blah, but that it sounds to me like plausible deniability, and you know, a good cover story that anybody could believe. I think I recall that Renata Tebaldi came under so much pressure that she actually associated herself with an initiative that said not C256, 257, or, you know, something like that, which naturally, since it wasn't based on principle, didn't go anywhere. But I wanted to bring that up and see what you thought.
Well, I know about Renata Tebaldi because I met her a lot of times in her flat in the center of Milan, and she actually wrote to me at a certain point that she wanted to candidate with us. We were creating a party in Italy, Patrioti d'Italia, Patriots for Italy, and she was ready to run there. But she was put under tremendous pressure from the US, because she sang at the Metropolitan, not to ally herself with LaRouche. And therefore, she decided to break contacts. This was before she died. She had, until then, she had been very supportive. But she said, I am really scared. They must have blackmailed her. So as you say, it's not only economic interests. There is also a lot of pressure, possibly not to endorse the Schiller Institute.
Great. Okay, I see Richard Burden has another question, but I just want to check if anybody else who hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet would like to.
I have a quick one. Actually, Toni Morse had an opera company in Newark. I can't remember the name of it. Actually, this is what the New York Times article referenced. I just don't have the article in front of me, but he did performances at C256, I think in the 90s, with his opera company, including Fidelio, I think he did. So this is another example. And when he retired after an incredible career, the first thing he did was joined the baritone section of our chorus. and joined our chorus. Anyway, because this was a real principled thing for him. The other question is, I'm trying to remember where Carlo Bergonzi made this remark that in his time there were 100 great tenors, and now we have only 3.5.
I know which one you mean by half, I know. First, the question, somebody wrote in the chat, it's true, it was the Lubo opera, I remember, Tony Morse. It was the Lubo opera, yes. He did Fidelio, and that was in the beginning of our campaign. A lot of people were interested and joined it. To the second question about Bergonzi, I think he may have made this remark when he spoke at Carnegie Hall. This was also organized by the Schiller Institute. He did the initiatives with us in Milan and in Busseto, but he also went to Carnegie Hall and we did a conference with him. I wasn't there. He went by himself. Invited by John Sigerson. So he may have said that there. And the half tenor, I think, is Carreras.
Great. Okay, I'm going to skip to Michelle, just because she hasn't asked yet.
Hi, Liliana. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Nice to see you.
Your comments about Simone Boccanegra are very interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that. But you provoked my curiosity about what you said about Otello, Verdi, Otello, and Boito. Are you speaking about the aria, the credo, his belief in evil, or what are you referring to?
I'm referring to both the libretto and the credo, and the fact that Boito was pushing Verdi to adapt more to the Wagnerian trend in music, which he always refused to do. And as a matter of fact, Otello, in terms of the music, I like a lot Macbeth, which is a bit Beethovenian, a little bit in the orchestration. But Otello is a little bit modern. Maybe I'm extremely traditionalist, but it's not my favorite opera. And this was the pressure on him, was that he was being too traditionalist and he should go more in the direction of Wagner.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and Peter Bowen. Go ahead, Peter. Oh.
How does Mike get in the queue for questions?
Oh, I don't hear Peter. Okay. All right. Okay, I don't know.
Mike seems to have a question.
Oh, Mike?
Yeah, Mike.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna unmute you.
No, he doesn't know how to.
I unmute you. Go ahead.
I didn't know how to get in the queue.
Okay.
Very, very good to see you, Liliana.
Hi, Mike.
Let me ask you about Maria Callas. She clearly had very, very strong registers. She had a lower register, which was unbelievable. But she would sing soprano, mezzo-soprano, coloratura. She would sing just about anything. And I'm not quite sure how she dealt with the register shifts, but she just had one of these incredible voices, which did register shift. But do you have a sense of somebody like that who can shift from, you know, soprano to mezzo with no problem?
Yes, I said Grace Bunbury. I met her in Bonn.
But I mean, at the same time, not sort of shifting to a different.
Well,
I mean,
not at the same time.
Domingo shifted to baritone when he got older, but I mean, she would sing, you know, one day after another, completely different register, different parts.
Well, a very, very talented voice can do this. I'm talking now about normal voices, because particularly in the time when you're being trained, when you're learning singing, this is very damaging. There are people like Pavarotti who said a voice has to mature, like also in terms of interpretation, not only in terms of the voice, of the register shifts. You cannot take roles which are dramatically and vocally difficult when you're young. You have to mature your voice, and you have to mature also your interpretation. So this is not advisable for everybody to do, to jump from one voice to the next. Even if you're talented, like Caruso was an extremely talented voice, he didn't need voice training, but his career lasted not very long. In the case of Callas, she was extremely talented, and she also was concentrated more on the question of dramatic interpretation. So she also acted in a movie. So it was, for her, it was a challenge, like Grace Bambury, to herself to do this, which she could do. I don't know if this reduced her career, because she essentially committed suicide, so she died young. I think she was 50. But people like Mirella Freni, who have not done this, are still singing at 80 years old.
Okay, great. Tim Rush.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the music manual in a while, so this is probably answered in it, but it goes back to Richard Burden's question in the beginning. My mental image of what we're talking about in register shifts is in a very, I compare it in my mind, but I know it's a very poor analogy to how you shift gears in a car. At a certain point, when you go into a different gear, you have a certain moment of instability, but then you get into something that has shifted. And in the case of the voice, what I'm wondering is, are there certain configurations of the vocal cords which lawfully reorganize themselves at certain points that we call the registers, but which enable these shifts in color? And that there's something not universal in all voices, but consistent in many voices, where these shifts in the geometry of how the vocal cords or the way the passaggio is working, there must be some underlying physiological increase of singularities or possibilities at certain vibration pitches.
Yes, there are. For example, the third register, the high register, in Italian is called the terzo registro, registro acuto, or also registro stretto, tight register, which refers to the fact that the vocal cords have to become very, very closed and tight on the high notes. And this is used, for example, in vocal therapy. I lost my voice once because I spoke when I was sick. I did a conference when I had bronchitis, and I lost completely my voice. So I had to do rehabilitation to start speaking again. And the therapist told me to use singing and high notes in order to get the vocal cords to close again. And this is a physical thing. So like the super high also, it is of course physical. You have physical changes when this happens, which can be checked by how do you say, otorino-laringoiatra, a throat doctor. They can put a camera and you can see this. But it's not advisable to do it while singing, because you get the impulse to throw up if you have the camera. I had to do it for medical reasons. In any case, yes, I can confirm that such changes are possible, and you can also influence them if you know the physical aspect very well. Most singers are unaware of this, but the teacher knows. And so if you do it in the wrong way, for example, you get this knots, knoten, nodi, nodes on your vocal cords, and they have to be taken away by surgery.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to take one more question here because we're actually over time. I'm going to ask the Olnowskis, the chefs. You have to unmute yourselves.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, we're over time. I'll try to be quick. One thing, it was Carlo Bergonzi's remark at Carnegie Hall was 2.5 tenors that we have today. And that's when the 3 tenors were very big and making these big concerts all over the place. So it was particularly ironic. On the issue of the vocal registers and so forth, I think there's a tendency, or can be a tendency, to look at these as mechanics, which is the wrong physical standpoint. It's a Newtonian standpoint. Whereas if we've learned from Lynn and others in physics, and I certainly can't speak to it in any detail, even if I wanted to, the physical universe is not a mechanical universe. The nature of the physical universe is one of energy and singularities and so forth. From that standpoint, the question of the registers has to be reviewed from the standpoint of the kind of way that Vernadsky would look at migration of atoms and so forth. We're talking about energy and fields, not just physical objects in terms of mechanics. The last thing I just wanted to say is that with regard to the opposition to our campaigns, the last thing the oligarchy wants is an educated populace, and particularly beauty, and even more so the connection of art and science. I said the same thing in a previous class, but it bears repeating. The separation of art and science is one of the ways to keep people stupid, because it brings in the arbitrary. And it's exactly people like Verdi who insist on that, and other artists who recognize that that's what the universe is. That's what we live in. That we have to keep in mind when we look at why the oligarchy is so insistent on preventing these kinds of initiatives. Thank you, Liliana.
Thank you. You said it all. I don't need to answer, but I can only confirm that the oligarchy is fighting any initiative which is aimed at educating the population by educating the audience. And this was what Schiller wanted and what Verdi wanted. That was the purpose of their art.
Thank you so much, Liliana. Is there anything else you'd like to say just before you send us off?
Well, I see a lot of interesting contributions on the chat about the Bell Laboratories. I will read them, and I asked Barbara to send me the quote by Mahler. I'm very interested. You can send it, if you don't, my email to Jenny, who will forward it to me. And I can only say, keep doing what you do with your chorus, and I'm sure this will affect the people in the audience, but it will also make you happy.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, everybody. And please, yes, you're getting a round of applause.
Thank you very much.
And there we go. This was really wonderful. Thank you. And, you know, I encourage folks to, if you haven't already, to join the choruses during the week. And if you can also, if you loved this class and want to see more, if you can make a contribution on the Schiller Institute New York chorus site. And we look forward to seeing you the next class in 2 weeks. We'll be getting an email out about that. That's going to be Fred Haight again. We switched it with Mihua's class, which will be later on. So thank you again. Thank you, Liliana.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Ciao. Buonanotte. For me, it's night. Buonanotte. Bye.
Bye.